All right, football fans, far and wide, welcome to the Football v Football podcast in collaboration with the Cowboys Starcast. We got OY on the call here. Seahawks playing the Cowboys tomorrow night, Thursday Night Football. It was going to be a hell of a matchup until the Seahawks stopped figuring out how to play offense, but I think it's still somewhat anticipated. So I want to introduce OY. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, bro. Pretty good. Just looking forward to this game. How about you?
Well, I was looking forward to it for a while when I felt like the team was doing well, and we had beat the Lions, we beat the Browns, and then the shellacking to the Ravens happened, and then losing to the Rams for a second time in the season happened, and then the trouncing by the Niners happened, which I guess it happened to both of us, but it still stings because I hate that team more than any other team, and I feel like probably you guys do as well.
Yeah, they're public enemy number one right now.
Yeah. Okay. So let's preview it by going through position groups because I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And the only way I have hope in this game is by looking at maybe some individual strengths that the Seahawks have and saying, well, if this position group can jump for a game, can play exceedingly well, then maybe there would be a chance. But let's start with the most important position, quarterback.
Long snapper? Oh, okay.
I couldn't even tell you who the long snapper is on the Seahawks, actually. Is that him? Do you know the Cowboys one?
God. So for the longest time, for a legit 15 plus years, our long snapper was LP Leducer, and he was a beast.
Okay.
We changed it up. I honestly couldn't even tell you right now, and I can't believe I don't know this. That's embarrassing.
No, man. Honestly, I don't know why or how people keep up with it because these guys aren't drafted.
It might be Jake McQuaid. Hold on. I need to verify this. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, because these guys are not drafted. You don't draft a long snapper, and it doesn't really make news when they sign one. So they could be shuffling through them behind the scenes, and I wouldn't even know. So
it's Trent Sieg. Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. So we'll move on from long snapper. It's probably not even important. But we'll go to the most important position, quarterback, obviously, and you can go ahead and start because you and Naif in absentia here sleeping, or I don't know what happens to somebody when they disappear in the Gulf, but you guys have been making a strong case for Dak. So I want you to go ahead and let loose on Dak Prescott, Dakota Prescott.
Yeah, so I think over the course of the season, I don't think there's been anybody who's been playing the position better than Dak over the whole course of the season. He's second in QBR right now. He's first in quarterback rating. He's second in touchdowns. He's one behind Josh Allen. He's top 10 in yards. I think he's second in completion percentage. And much to the chagrin of ESPN and FS1, he is not amongst the leaders in interceptions. And I don't have the advanced stats in front of me, but his EPA, per play, he's up there. He might be leading the league actually in that category as well, depending on the specific kind of advanced stat. But point is, he's up there. He's top 5, top 10, top 1 in a lot of these categories. And you see, beyond just the numbers, you kind of see it play out on the field, like just the way he's playing, confidence, the control of the offense, the throws that he's making. He is carrying this team. He's carrying the offense. We saw it, I think. So the first few weeks of the season, I think they were trying this whole control, a controlled offense to play to the defense type thing. It might also have been just working out the kinks of a new offensive scheme. But after the bye week, after the Chargers game, or no, let me back up. After the 49ers game, after we got it handed to us in that game, something changed. And I think we started to see it play out in the Chargers game. He was more active with his legs. He was running more, moving around more. He was playing more free. And I think it really, we saw it ramp up after the bye week. So I think, he is just playing at an elite level. We heard what Aaron Rodgers said the other day about, the way that Dak's playing. And you can feel however you feel about Rodgers, but I think as a quarterback, as a player, he is one of the greatest of all time. And I have long said that outside of Rodgers, Dak is the smartest quarterback in the league, smartest starting quarterback. He has the highest football IQ. He's very cerebral, and not a lot of quarterbacks play that way right now. A lot of guys rely on their athleticism, their runners, they have a big arm, things like that. But he beats you with his brain, right? Before snap, after snap, whatever. So, yeah, I just don't think anybody is playing better than him right now. And I would say, actually, people are acting surprised, but we have seen glimpses of this before. In 2021, he was playing like this. He got hurt. He had the calf strain, wasn't able to kind of get back to that form. Last year, he got hurt, came back. He was still playing well, but unfortunately, we had the picks and the tip balls and all that stuff going on. I think you're seeing things starting to come to fruition now, and it's very encouraging to kind of see how he's been playing.
Yeah, man. To me, honestly, it all comes down to the cadence. Yeah, here we go, dude. It's so unique. It doesn't even correspond to anything that I've seen before because usually it's like a color and a number, but he just broke the mold, and ever since that's become popular, he's really taken off. But really, I mean, to be serious, I think he's always had the capability of being a top tier quarterback, and everything about him has been except for the interceptions. And so now that he's cut out the interceptions, there's no other argument to make against him. So I think that's what's really kind of propelled him. And you mentioned Aaron Rodgers was even like breaking down some of the tape on the Pat McAfee show about what he likes about him and the advanced level stuff that he's doing. So I agree, and I'll give my take on my quarterback, Geno Smith. It's after having Russ for 10 years or so. It's tough to talk about your quarterback being mediocre, and that's exactly what Geno Smith is. He's inconsistent. He'll have some good games. He'll have some bad games, and he's league average, which is better than I had initially thought when he became the full-time starter. I thought last year at the beginning of the year when he became the full-time starter, he was going to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the league because what I had seen from him at the end of the year previous. But he has elevated to be better than that. He shows flashes of playing well, and his connection with Tyler Lockett is exceptional, which is really important. The way he syncs up with DK Metcalf, not great. I think he's establishing a rapport with JSN, who actually, I think, given his talent and effort that he gives, I'm a proponent of making JSN the wide receiver 1 and demoting DK to the wide receiver 3 because of his drops and his reluctance to really work on his craft. He's just raw talent, and he doesn't seem to want to develop it. So I say all that to say Geno is clearly at the disadvantage here. So I'm taking Dak over over Geno in the QB battle on this Thursday night matchup. So advantage Cowboys. So move to the next position, running back.
Can I just real quick?
Go ahead.
A few seconds on Geno. You feel frustrated, but I will say I do think he is somebody who can get the job done. You know, like I don't think he's bad. You know, like I understand what you're saying about him being mediocre, but we have seen him at times play fairly well. He's capable of like sustaining an offense and putting that offense out there. I wonder how much of it is due to I don't know. I know he's been banged up a little bit this year. I know his bicep is like he's kind of banged up right now, and I think before it was his knee, right, or his ankle or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's what was going on, but yeah, I think something seems a little clunky with what's going on this year. But anyway, that's kind of my take. I still think he's a competent NFL quarterback. I'm not going to kind of look past him here. But.
Right. Yeah. Where would you rank him, 1 through 32?
Somewhere between 12 and, I don't know, 16, 17, something like that.
Same. I'd say he is just in that middle cluster, whatever. Maybe even just like 15 or 16, to be honest. So when you have something like that, you need to have an exceptional defense and weapons around you and an offensive coordinator. And our offensive coordinator is not great, and he's shown that recently. And the thing about Geno is he's not an exceptional passer. He doesn't have great QB, passing IQ, and he's not like exceptionally mobile. So he doesn't have a real strength. He's just kind of okay at both. All right, moving on to the running backs here. I'll start with the Seahawks. So Ken Walker is probably out for this game. So we're going to be relying on Zack Charbonnet and maybe DJ Dallas, but more likely they're going to. I know, right? More likely it's going to be Kenny McIntosh. I'm sure you haven't heard of him. There's no reason for you to know who that is. Bringing him up from the practice squad. But DJ Dallas, the issue with him is he's like a below average running back, and he muffed and lost a punt against the 49ers on Thursday, and he's just not that great. So it's going to be Zack Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh. And Charbonnet has a high floor but a very low ceiling. He's like a bruising back. He'll get at least 1 or 2 yards on each play. So like on fourth down, he'll be likely to, if it's 4th and 1, you got to give it to Charbonnet. He'll get that yard. He lowers his shoulder. But if you're expecting big runs from this guy, his absolute maximum would be like maybe 40, 50 yards. And really like a big run for him is like 15 to 20 yards. So Kenny McIntosh, we haven't seen much from him. I don't know what he's going to do really. But I'll let you speak on the Cowboys running backs.
So it's interesting. I think Tony Pollard was coming into this season. I don't think we can call it an audition season because, yeah, it's the first time he's the lead back, but I don't know how serious the team was about giving him a long-term deal. Like he would have had to have like an unbelievable season, right? Like I'm talking like one of those like 1,000 yards of rushing, 1,000 yards per season, like you know what I mean, like 2,000 plus scrimmage yard type seasons. To I think for the team to have considered signing him to a long-term deal. Hey, he can still end the season on a strong note. I think he started out. He didn't look right the first half of the season. I don't know if it was just the him still trying to get back from the broken leg. Some of it might have been due to poor run blocking because our offensive line wasn't really up to snuff, I think, the first half. They're starting to get in their groove over the past month. We've kind of seen that. So that might be a reason, actually, as well, why he has looked better the past couple of weeks. I will say that I would prefer putting him in space and running him outside. I think I've seen enough from him where I can say he's not a great in between the tackle. Like he can do it. Like he can get the job done, right? Like he'll show you in spurts here and there. But I don't know if that's like his strength. I think what I would like to see is that I would like to see more Rico Dowdle. He has looked good in spurts. Again, I don't think he's like an RB1 by himself, but as like a complement to somebody, I think Rico Dowdle can be a pretty competent running back, and he's a tough runner. I think he's built for running in between the tackles. So I would like to see more of like a 60-40 type split and keep both of them fresh, really, especially Tony Pollard. I want to keep Pollard fresh so that we can use him when it matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny. Like if I consider the running back group as a whole, I think Seattle might actually have the edge here because even though I think on an individual basis, I think Pollard is probably the most talented. I think that combination of a Walker and Charbonnet is pretty solid. I think that's a good combination. I know Walker's been banged up a little bit, and he hasn't looked as good as he has last year, but if he's still the same running back, I think that's a pretty good one too that you guys have there.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. If Ken Walker was going to play on Thursday, then I would probably give the slight edge to Seattle, given Ken Walker's really good, and Charbonnet could be like a starter on a lot of teams. But the fact that Charbonnet is going to be the starter and backing him up is Kenny McIntosh, I got to give the advantage to the Cowboys for Thursday for this matchup. Tony Pollard and Dowdle. Do you guys play Deuce Vaughn at all? Does he get any snaps?
No, he's been inactive for a while now. I think they kind of want to redshirt him this year, get him used to the game. It just seems like things were moving really fast for him when he was on the field.
Right. And I'll say a note on Tony Pollard. I kind of mentioned to you guys occasionally in the chat. He doesn't seem to be the same guy this year after his surgery. He had like a substantial surgery, right? I mean, it was
for broken leg.
So he just doesn't look as explosive to me. I mean, that run that he had, I think, what was it, like a week or two ago, was amazing. But that's like not even his style, really. It's like he's more of like a speedster. Like you get him open in open field, and he's one of the fastest guys in the league. But I just think it just looks like he's lost a step a little bit. And I'll always say this: I was a huge fan of Pollard during the past like 2 or 3 years, and the fact that Dallas didn't maximize his prime before this big injury. I don't know. I would be better about that. I'm really, and as a Tony Pollard fan, I was bitter, to be honest. But hopefully he can regain the step.
I don't blame you, man. If he really doesn't look like Tony Pollard for the rest of the year, I would.
Yeah. All right. Moving to wide receivers. So why don't you start with wide receivers here? At what let's do wide receivers and tight ends together, pass catchers.
Okay, so look, receiver. This is a tough one actually. So if we only do receivers, I think it's kind of a push because I think the Seahawks have that top three. I think if you go on an individual basis, I'm taking Ceedee over everybody. But then it starts getting, then you can start getting competitive here a little bit. I think Cooks is starting to kind of get comfortable, and the offense is starting to use him, and he's looked really good. But you know how I feel about Tyron Lockett. I think he's one of the most underrated, or has been one of the most underrated receivers in the league. Mm-hmm. I think that JSN is really starting to come on. the last month or so, it seems like it's kind of starting to click for him.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does, he can be a number one. JSN can be a number one.
Yeah.
And I think DK is the interesting one. So I think he's a big, strong receiver, and he can outmuscle you and outrun you. But I said it. I don't know if you can run like the whole route tree with him.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder about his route running kind of ability. So I think DK is a good receiver. I don't know if he's in that elite category like with Ceedee. So I think top to bottom, just receivers. I think there's a strong case to say that Seattle is kind of more leveled out. But if you add in the tight ends, I'm not too familiar with Seahawks, but Jake Ferguson's been playing pretty well for the Cowboys. Like he has looked really good, and Dak loves to hit those tight ends like on those seam routes, those vertical seam routes down the middle of the field. So I think if we include that, I'm going to give a slight edge to the Cowboys, mainly because I think Ceedee Lamb has grown into that alpha wide receiver, that those top wide receivers, like top 5, top 6 type receiver.
Yeah.
So I will do that, but I do think that the Seahawks receivers are a strength of that team, maybe the strength of that team.
Yes.
I think that might be the strongest position group on that team.
Yeah, this is the only position on the offense where I'm giving the Seahawks the edge over the Cowboys, and even collectively, to be honest with you, even including tight ends. DK, as you mentioned, when he wants to play, when he wants to be a great receiver, he can, and he is a Pro Bowler. I mean, I think his ceiling is the best wide receiver in the league, but it doesn't seem like he wants to get there. He doesn't do the work. Even when you ask him about the way he conducts himself, he says, "I am who I am, and I'm not going to change." And that's really troubling that we're making this guy the number one receiver on this team. Tyler Lockett is great. I think one of the most underrated receivers, very, very reliable for so many years. Like, the fact that this guy can be a number 2 receiver for as many years as he has been, going from being second to Doug Baldwin to second to DK Metcalf and staying as consistent, and the connection he has with Geno is really, really strong. JSN, I think, is a guy that should be promoted from a slot guy into a 1 or a 2. Had an amazing one-handed catch on Thanksgiving and shows his potential. And there's another guy named Jake Bobo. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's the number 4 receiver on the team.
He torched us in the preseason. I remember him.
He is really, really good. He might be one of the best number 4 receivers in the league that I know of, honestly. And he's just not used enough. And he just falls in the depth chart. Part of that is Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron is the real issue with this team. I've talked about that before, the offensive coordinator. He doesn't scheme guys open. Noah Fant and Will Dissly and Colby Parkinson are the tight ends on the team. When Noah Fant and Will Dissly particularly get the ball, they're really good. Noah Fant has a lot of potential. He was an early round pick. He was I think he was like a first or second round pick. He has
Denver.
A lot of talent. Yeah. Will Dissly also very good. So, as I relate it to, obviously, I agree with you. CeeDee Lamb is the best wide receiver in this game. And, you talked about some of the other guys. Cooks, I think, in certain games, I think he can take over. I think he's very, very fast, and he's a good receiver. But I think Gallup is the one that is inconsistent. And then I know Tolbert had like one good game, but I haven't seen much from him after that. I think Schoonmaker, Luke Schoonmaker actually makes some really, really great catches. I watch him from time to time, and you mentioned Jake Ferguson. So, listen, it's going to be tough, and we'll touch on this when we talk about the defenses. But this is the position group where I would say advantage Seattle for me personally. We can talk briefly about the offensive line. Yeah, go ahead. You're gonna say something?
Real quick, just to have a little fun here.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance that the Seahawks might trade Metcalf in the offseason?
That's a really, really good point. I think if given the right compensation, they should, because I think despite the hope that I've had in this guy, and I've drafted him like in fantasy like every year, it seems like it's a mental thing with him. He does not want to become better. He wants to coast on his talent and his frame and his ability without getting better. And that's not really a guy that I want long term on the team. I don't want to get. I don't want them to give him another big contract, because that money can go elsewhere. So to answer your question, I would be open to it for sure.
Yeah, I can just see it because you guys have that talent on, at wide receiver. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah. So let's talk briefly about the offensive lines. I'll just start with our line. Um, they're just okay. They usually get the job done in terms of giving Geno that the standard 3 seconds. At times they'll give him more, at times they'll give him less, but they also just seem to be like an average to maybe slightly below average line. Um, are the two rookies that we drafted last year that we used a lot of draft capital on? One of them is injured. He has been for most of the year. The other one is underperforming. First, the guy I'm talking about is Abe Lucas. Next guy is Charles Cross. And then the other three positions we've just been kind of rotating in and out. Damian Lewis and Stone Forsythe and Evan Brown and just like a bunch of like no name type of guy. I mean, most offensive linemen are no names, but so there's nothing to be excited about with this offensive line. But I'm gonna hand it off to you here, because the Cowboys have some of the like they have a potential like all timer on their offensive line. So I'll hand it off to you.
um, yeah, so I think we have names on our offensive line, right? I think you have Zach Martin,
Right?
right? He's I don't know if that's who you're alluding to, but he's been like that all timer for us.
Yep.
You have Tyron, right?
Yep.
He's a Hall of Famer. You have Tyler, who's looking like an All Pro. You have Terrence Steele on the right side, who was really good last year, and then Tyler Biotish, who he's okay. I think he's a solid average, at times above average center. What I would say is that the line struggled during the first half of the season to build like some cohesion, and I think they're starting to build it now. For the past month, like I kind of mentioned it earlier, but they're playing better. Tyron is playing amazing. Tyron has been, I think, our best offensive lineman, and it's funny because the only issue with him, right, has been injuries. Because when he plays, it's great. And so what they're doing to try to hopefully, inshallah, like make sure he doesn't get hurt, is they're not practicing. Like he doesn't practice. He just walks through and he doesn't practice.
Yeah.
He didn't want like any wear and tear, none of that. So he doesn't practice. Tyler has been pancaking dudes left and right. So I'm really happy with what I've seen from him. Terrence Steele had a rough start to the season, and it might have been him coming off that ACL. But the past couple of weeks, I think he's kind of starting to pick it up, and it might just be like more distance from the injury that's helping him, more time for recovery. What's weird is that Zach Martin has not been struggling, but he hasn't been like dominant. And what they're saying is it's probably like a lingering injury. He had a groin, I think, pull like a month or two ago, and then there might be something with his leg going on right now, they're saying. But yeah, Zach Martin's he hasn't been bad. He just hasn't been like, Zach Martin.
Right.
So I think the line is starting to be good. If you had asked me like 6-7 weeks ago, I might have said, oh, they're like average, maybe slightly below average at times based on how they're playing. But now I think they're starting to get going. I think they're solid, and they're growing into being a good offensive line at this point. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see kind of how they go from there.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that there's a lot of teams where I don't know a single offensive lineman. The fact that I know about Zach Martin and Ty Smith and these guys, that tells you all you need to know. So if I'm evaluating the offense, Seahawks versus Cowboys, I'm going 3-1 Cowboys. And and I'm grouping the wide receivers and tight ends. Maybe if we're separating wide receivers and tight ends, two to the Cowboys, one to the Seahawks, and then like one tie for the tight ends. What would you say about that? Do you?
I think it's probably the same. We just flip. I think I picked the running backs over. I think I picked Seattle's running backs. I think it's basically the same.
But even without Ken Walker, because Ken Walker's not, I don't think he's going to play.
Well, if you're talking about just for this game, then no, I'm taking the Cowboys. But just kind of like based on like the actual kind of lineup players that I would take.
Would you take for the receivers? Who do you think for this game?
We're including tight ends or no tight ends?
No tight ends.
No tight ends. I would slightly take the Cowboys.
Okay.
But I have no like serious disagreement with you taking Seattle because I think that trio, right? You guys have that depth there that a lot of teams don't have. So that makes sense.
So you're
kind of leaning heavily on Ceedee. I'm leaning heavily on Ceedee is what I'm doing.
Yeah, right. So you're going 4-0 Cowboys. I'm going 3-1 Cowboys on offense. All right, moving to the defense here. So I'm not going to know as much about the defense, about Cowboys defense as you, so I'm going to lean on you here. Of course, the big names I do know, but we'll start with the defensive line for the Cowboys. So you can start there.
Are we including Micah or not?
Well, I guess technically he's a linebacker, right? So I mean, I
okay,
get
so
yeah. You know what? Let's say front seven.
Front seven. Okay, let's do front seven. It'll save us time too.
Yeah.
Okay, so front seven. I'm just gonna be honest. I think the Cowboys have a top 2 defensive line rotation on the edge. That edge rotation, I think, is top 2 in the league. I maybe top 1. They're so deep and they're so good, right? We started putting Micah, Tank Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong, who's really good. He's a great 3rd or 4th rusher. Sam Williams has a lot of potential. We see it at times. He makes some boneheaded plays here and there, but you know what? You always need a guy like that to kind of spice it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam Williams, a lot of potential there. And then Dante Fowler, like I think people forget, like this guy was like a lot. He was like a top 5, top 6 pick, I think. Definitely top 10 from what I remember.
Mm.
So a lot of talent there, and Dan Quinn knows how to use them. So that edge group, I'm taking against. I'll take it against anybody in the league. The interior line, I think, is starting to get better. It's historically over the past decade been a weakness. I think Jonathan Hankins has been playing well. I think Mozzie Smith, he's starting to grow. We see flashes. It's always harder for defensive tackles to, have an impact early on, unless you're like Jalen Carter, right? Just like a freak. But usually it's harder for defensive tackles to kind of have an impact early on. But he's starting to show flashes, and I think he's okay. He's getting there. So I think the interior line is okay, but I think the edge is elite. And when you look at the linebackers, it's really interesting. Damone Clark is playing well. I don't think he's playing at a Pro Bowl level, but he's playing well. Marquise Bell was a safety that Dan Quinn moved to linebacker when our 3rd round pick, DeMarvion Overshown, got hurt in the offseason. And he's been playing really, really well. And say what you will about PFF or whatever, but he's been one of the highest rated linebackers in the league. Now, the issue is that a lot of people feel like he's undersized, right? He's 205 pounds, I think. So he's one of these new age, safety linebacker hybrids. Or at least I think that's what Dan Quinn is trying to use him as. So the only issue there is, can he hold up, right? And that may be why you want to sign Shaq Leonard. But I think the front 7, led by that edge group, is elite, and I would take them over probably, at least the edge group over anybody in the league. So.
Okay. Let me go through the Seahawks. So the number 1 guy for the front 7 is Boye Mafe, and I'm going to mention some names that I know that a lot of fans around the league, if you're not a Seahawks fan, maybe you won't know. They're not household names yet. But Boye Mafe recently set the Seahawks record for most consecutive games with a sack. He had 7 straight games, something Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, Frank Clark couldn't do. So, and every game, even if he doesn't get a sack, you see him involved on tipped passes, on pressures, on hurries, on stuff like that. He is the real anchor of this Seahawks pass rush. And Uchenna Nwosu, they unfortunately he's out for the season. He was the best guy last year. But we have Draymond Jones that came over, I think, from the Broncos that also has flashes. I think he plays well like every other game, unfortunately. Leonard Williams, the guy that they spent a second round pick on, he is starting to become more comfortable in this defense. He's starting to get more hurries and he's starting to get closer in terms of shoring up the interior of the defensive line. So I'm becoming more impressed with him. Some of the other guys they have, Darrell Taylor, he was great last year. He's just okay this year. Derek Hall, Jaron Reed is the guy that tipped the ball last week that resulted in Jordan Brooks's pick six. So in terms of strictly the line, the defensive line, not counting, I guess if you're putting Parsons, I guess maybe at linebacker because I think he officially lines up at linebacker, right? And then he just kind of rushes from there. Is that right?
That's his official position. Yeah.
Okay. So not knowing as much. I mean I know about Dexter Lawrence for sure, but not knowing as much about the other guys.
Marcus.
Sorry, it's Tank Lawrence, right?
Marcus Lawrence.
Marcus Lawrence. Yeah. Right. So, not knowing as much about him, if we're going strictly defensive line, what I've seen from the Seahawks, I'd be impressed enough to give a slight edge, and we're not talking about Parsons. We're not talking about Parsons. I'd be impressed enough to give a slight edge to the Seahawks here, or maybe a tie, maybe a push here. So if we go to the linebackers, it's very clearly once you put Micah Parsons in the equation, it automatically gives it to the Cowboys. Now, I will say about Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks. So Bobby Wagner still has the IQ of a Hall of Fame linebacker, but his body does not perform what his mind tells him to do. He's lost a step. But what I like that he's doing, and I'm really glad the Seahawks brought him back, is because he is slowly imparting all of his wisdom onto Jordan Brooks. And every week that I see Jordan Brooks, he is improving and is starting to look like a Bobby Wagner type. He's the one that got the pick six last week. He consistently leads the team in tackles. And so that's one of the positives there. Jamal Adams actually has been playing a lot of linebacker, so but he's extremely erratic. He's extremely erratic, so he'll make some great plays, tackles for loss, and then he also headed a ball this year that resulted in a pick, and he'll injure himself. He's just like a ball of energy, honestly. So, but just for Micah Parsons for the linebackers. I'm giving it to the Cowboys. Defensive backs. Do you want to start with yours because you have a pick six specialist on your team?
Okay, so I'll start with safeties first, and then I'll move to corner. Okay. So if you had asked me last year, I would have said that safety was clearly advantage Cowboys. I think it's a lot closer this year. I mean, I don't know exactly how your safeties are playing this year, but I think the Cowboys starters have been a little not bad, but not as good as we had hoped. We thought that these guys were going to be a major strength of the defense, and they've been all right. Malik Hooker I think has played well. I think Jaron Curse has been a little underwhelming, at least compared to how he played last year. I think Donovan Wilson for most of the season. So he's a boomer bust kind of player. Like you're kind of saying about Jamal Adams is erratic. Donovan Wilson's either going to give up like a long game, or he's going to blow up the play and cause a fumble or scoop and score, like something like that. We haven't been seeing the splash plays from Donovan Wilson. Maybe lately, like I've seen a few here and there, but over the bulk of the season, I haven't seen them. So safeties have been a little subpar compared to where they were last year. Corners, though, corners is where it's interesting. I think so. Before I get to Bland, Stephon Gilmore has been really good. Like he's been really good. He's not what he was. He's not defensive player of the year. He's not all pro. But as a number 2 corner on your team, he's been really good. Very reliable, very smart, fundamentally sound. He's going to give you what you need. Deron Bland, what can I say, right? He's been a good corner. It's not just the pick sixes. He's been playing really well. I don't think it's a fluke because he also had 5 interceptions last year. Maybe getting like 5 pick sixes is, I don't know how sustainable that is. But as far as like being a good corner, it's not fluky. I think he's a really good corner. Now what sucks is that he was our slot corner, and then Diggs was the other corner. So this was going to be like a major strength of the team, right? So we're deprived of that. But I think overall, very pleased with what we've seen from the corners this year. Maybe not so much in the slot. Jordan Lewis has had his ups and downs, but those 2 boundary corners, I think, have played really well. And especially if Lance and DPOY conversations, right? But I will say, and you can talk about this a little bit more. I think corner is sneakily close because I think you guys have Tariq Woolen, right, orthotic Woolen, and you have Witherspoon, or is it Witherspoon?
Witherspoon.
He's great. I love the guy. He's a physical corner. He will hit you. He will tackle. I love seeing that. And I think you guys have 2 really good boundary corners on your team as well. So corner is a little close. I think secondary is a little bit closer than maybe some of the other positions. But I think both teams are sporting some good corner play.
Well, that's high praise from you to even call it close, I would say, because when you have a guy like Deron Bland that's having like an all-time season like this, to acknowledge the Seahawks and their cornerbacks is makes me feel good about the Seahawks. Now, I'll talk about the safeties. So Quandre Diggs is the primary safety on this team. He plays like the Earl Thomas role. He's not as good as Earl Thomas, obviously, but recently he's been like all over the field. Like he'll sometimes like seems like he almost leads the league in leads the team in tackles. And he flies around. Like he'll miss some tackles, but he'll be involved in like almost every play, which I really, really like. Jamal Adams, I mentioned him. He plays a lot of linebacker, but when he does play like the Cam Chancellor type of strong safety, he's a big hitter. And he excites everybody on the team. Julian Love is the other guy that plays a lot of safety, and he'll have good games as well. But really, you mentioned it, the defensive backs are one of the real strengths of this team. Devin Witherspoon, I think he's one of the contenders for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I'm not going to say Player of the Year, but for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Thought Woolen, who recently changed his name to Reek Woolen, which I'll just side note on this. The fact that Ahmed Gardner and Thought Woolen, 2 of the premier players in the NFL, both changed their names. We know them as Sauce and Reek. Like, what's up with that? Like, we don't have to kowtow to these people that don't know how to say our names. Just keep your names. But talking about their play, so Thought Woolen actually, under the radar, was actually benched against the Niners because of lack of form tackling. Essentially, he like missed a few tackles, and that's who he is. He is, exceptionally talented, but a lot of times he plays on instinct. So when they drafted him, he was actually very unpolished as a cornerback. but because the Seahawks are committed to playing their zone defense, they rely on guys that have good instincts. That when a receiver goes and sits into that zone gap, somebody will be able to like get there quick enough to knock the ball away. And so that's why he was so successful. That's why he led the league in interceptions last year and got freaking no acclaim for that. Um, but we also have a couple other guys that I think boost this team. We have a guy named Michael Jackson and a guy named Trey Brown, who are both I think really really good as well, and would be starters on other teams. So
Do you know?
yeah,
Do you know the funny thing about Michael Jackson?
he was on the Cowboys.
We drafted him. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
He's
I
great,
like him
dude.
coming out. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
great. He's great. So as I mean, as crazy. Well, I don't know. I don't even know if I could say this really because Gilmore and Bland are huge names, especially this year. Um, Depth wise, I would take the Seahawks, but high end, I'm taking the Cowboys. And because I'm a Seahawks fan, I would say overall, if you're going the entire defensive back unit, which actually for the Seahawks has been playing really well, one of their strengths, I would maybe slightly take the Seahawks or a tie. So
Yeah.
if I'm being like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna dive into being a homer in this one and just say
Just do it, man.
2-1 to Seahawks on defense. So I'm taking slightly the defensive line. I'm taking slightly the defensive back unit, and I'm giving you absolutely with your MVP Micah Parsons, the linebacker. So, yours I'm assuming would be 3-0 Cowboys.
I'll give you. You know what? I'll give you because of the safeties and because of the depth at corner. We're still technically without our CB1, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'll go 2-1. I'll kind of
Okay.
be nice here. I'll say 2-1.
Right.
Even with Bland, I think kind of having this season, I think it seems like the Seahawks have some depth there, and Cowboys do have guys that they like as well. They like Eric Scott, just drafted him this year, but he's really raw, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't really had a chance to kind of develop his skills yet. So I think that's a good point you make that, high end, we have like these high end guys. It's just a matter of whether the depth can compete with the Seahawks. So
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
So I would say the number one thing to watch in this game is the passing game because we're talking about Seahawks. One of their strengths is wide receivers, and Cowboys. I think one of their strengths is also those two defensive backs. And then on the other side as well, in my opinion, I think the only way the Seahawks can win this game is by their defensive backs dominating the Cowboys wide receivers and tight ends. However that can get done. Obviously, I think the Cowboys, I'm sure they're a betting favorite, maybe by a touchdown, especially at home. But the only path I see to victory here is the defensive backs of the Seahawks really, really stepping up and just not giving Dak any open spaces to throw the ball. And that's going to be very tough with CeeDee Lamb. But some of the other guys I think possibly could be neutralized. That's the only path to victory I could see for the Seahawks. How do you see the Cowboys winning this one?
You know what? I actually kind of have a different take on what the Cowboys might do. It would not surprise me if they lean heavy on the run here.
Right.
I think it's starting to kind of it's been starting to look better, and I mean maybe you know better than I do, but I've heard that the Seahawks run defense hasn't been as
Horrible.
I guess reliable.
Yeah, they're still horrible.
So it would not surprise me if they try to rely on the run game a little bit. Because here's the thing, I think Pete Carroll does a really good job of muddying up the game a little bit, right? He'll be physical. I think you'll see, and you know this, like Seahawks, like the DBs, they're very grabby, and I don't mean that in like a bad way. I just mean like they're very physical.
They lead the league in penalties, by the way. Yeah, so they are very grabby. Yeah.
I mean, they're coached that way. They're
Yeah.
coached that way, right?
Yeah.
It's like It's like, hey, let's see how much you can get away with. We're gonna like physically like move these guys around.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it'd be great to see like the Cowboys come out and like air raid like they've been doing, but this is a respectable team. This is a good team. This is a playoff contending team, and I don't think it's fair to expect it's just going to be like an air raid like like it's been like we've been having. We've kind of gotten spoiled with like some of these blowout victories that we've had. So
It's going to be interesting because also, there's a lot of talk about how the Cowboys, they're trying to undermine them by saying they haven't beaten like a winning team or whatever. So I hear a lot of people say like if the Cowboys beat the Seahawks, you got to start respecting them because that is it's a team with a winning record, and of course I don't subscribe to that. I think Cowboys can contend. I can't wait until they start, because they contended with the Eagles. Very close to beating the Eagles. So
right.
I think
Yeah, this is. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think if they're able to win this, and especially win it soundly, I think that they're gonna get like a good amount of respect.
We'll see. The national talk shows they always move the goalposts because it gives people an incentive to keep watching. Right, it's like a moneymaker for them. But honestly, this is a game where I do not care about style points. Just win the game.
Yeah.
Because again, my thing with playing the Seahawks, if you remember, I don't know if it was this past episode or the one before it on our Starcast episode where I asked Naif, I was like, hey, would you rather go to San Francisco and play them there, or would you rather go to Seattle? And the reason I said that is like, look, like obviously, with all respect, I think the Niners are a better team. They're more talented, but
Of course.
the Seahawks in Seattle, especially, like Pete Carroll has these guys like playing a certain way, and it can be very tough.
Yes.
If they start having their way, right? If they start grabbing your receivers, throwing them off their routes, if the defense starts intimidating the offense, because that's what they're going to try to do, right? That's how they're coached.
Yeah.
I think it can muddy up the game a little bit. I've heard people compare it to like what Pittsburgh does, right? That's how Pittsburgh plays. It's a very like grind it down, like punch you in the mouth kind of game. Make it ugly, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Try to win ugly. So I would be a little concerned about Pete Carroll trying to make it ugly. The Cowboys just have to. If it was me, I know I said like run the ball, but I think even within that, just try to score as many points as quick as you can, so that you don't give Seattle a chance to make it ugly.
Yeah.
Like, make them keep up with you is what I would try to do.
Right. Yeah. And I agree with you. And Naif, I won't forget what he said, as I mentioned. And I don't think he understood the nuance the same way that you understand it and what you were trying to say, which is essentially Seattle as a home crowd. It's a cold place. It's a rainy place. Just like the atmosphere, you're going to get the 12s. You're going to get the noise. You're going to get all that kind of stuff. And San Francisco, while they are the better team, obviously, like kind of clearly, they won 31-13 against us like a few days ago. They play in Santa Clara, and they don't have much of a home field advantage. I would bet that I won't say that. I think they used to have a better home field advantage than they do now. I think there are a lot of Niners fans and they travel, but I would bet that you would be able to get more Cowboys fans in San Francisco than probably in Seattle. Now, lucky for Cowboys fans, I don't think there is a scenario where the Cowboys would have to come to Seattle this year. I don't think Seattle is good enough, essentially. So you're probably just looking at the San Francisco going into San Francisco. But we'll see. I don't know. There's a lot of games left. Maybe Seahawks can turn it around, but it doesn't look promising. So I know that I initially said half an hour. We've gone way over that half an hour, but
It's all good, man.
yeah, no. But this was great. This was a great conversation. Good to get this back going. I'm glad we did it. a collaboration between the Football v Football podcast and the greatest Cowboys podcast in the universe, the Cowboys Starcast. So I'm glad we did it, and my bad we weren't able to do the other platform. Hopefully this is suitable, and we'll be.
Oh no, man, no worries, man.
Yeah.
No, this works. It's all about getting that information out there, right? It's for the viewers, and trying to get the talking points out there so people can listen and enjoy. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be a good game. I don't think this is good. I would be shocked if it's a blowout. I think, again, like I said, I think Seattle is a good team. They're a playoff team, and they're fighting for a while. It's not like they're just rolling over, right? Like, no, like this is an important game for them. So
yeah,
I do think it's going to be a tough kind of game to kind of get through. So we'll see how it goes.
I hope you're right. We'll see the dynamic, the Dan Quinn Pete Carroll dynamic. I'm looking forward to that. Like, who knows more about the other? Maybe there's an advantage there. And I'll say one last note about your kicker. He hasn't missed a kick yet, right? Did he?
Mashallah, no, he has not.
Yeah. Well, I didn't.
He's missed extra points.
I didn't say it to jinx him. I'm just saying. Oh, he's missed extra. I didn't even know he missed extra points.
He missed extra points. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay.
I think like 2 or 3.
Well, there's not that pressure then, because the pressure comes with never, missing a kick. But that guy, for a while there, they were saying he didn't miss a single kick, which is amazing. And Jason Myers, our kicker, is the second highest paid kicker in the league, and he's had to carry us for parts of the season. But once you get him like over 50, and usually, especially like over 53, 54, he's not that great, unfortunately. So.
Well, what's funny is we've kind of like talked about this, where I think you mentioned it, where you just like you don't understand why you just don't go and get like a soccer player or somebody who played soccer, and get them to like kick field goals, and that's literally what we did. This guy played soccer, and he played in the XFL later, but like. It's just funny, right? This is the second, I think, player we've had who has XFL experience, who's been like a key contributor, like a significant contributor, like Cavante Turpin, right?
Yeah.
XFL MVP,
right?
And now he's like returning kicks and catching touchdowns and other things for us.
Yeah. Our Cavante Turpin is a guy named D. Eskridge, who we drafted first with our first pick 2 years ago, and was horrible until last game, where he got like 150 return yards or something like that. So he's finally starting to play. So maybe he can be an X factor in this one as well. But okay, we've gone for a while here. OY, thank you so much, man, for jumping on and collaborating here. The Cowboys Starcast, all Cowboys fans, or if you're not a Cowboys fan. Everybody, even if you're, Cowboys fans, for sure, go and check out this podcast. It's a great, great podcast. Even if you're not, you're just a general football fan, check out the Cowboys Starcast. They do a great job. Great analysis. These are guys that have been Cowboys fans for years and years and years, and it shows in the group chat. So, for OY, absolutely. For OY, I'm Baggers, and for the Football v Football podcast and the Cowboys Starcast, have a fantastic day, football fans.